My name is Evan Miller, and for the first time in a long while, life felt steady. I'm 36, a mechanical engineer in Austin, Texas, raising my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, in the same cedar-framed house my father built with his hands. I'd finally paid off the mortgage last spring, patched the roof myself, and planted new roses by the porch. For years, that house had been both a burden and a promise, proof that the sacrifices of the past hadn't been wasted. That Friday afternoon, the sun was low, the air smelled faintly of rain. Lily was in the back seat, singing along to the radio as I pulled into the driveway. Then I saw it, a black pickup parked by the curb, engine idling. A tall man leaned against it, sunglasses on, a grin I hadn't seen in over a decade. Ryan Miller, my little brother. He hadn't called, written, or shown up when Dad died, but now he was here, dressed sharp, boots polished, eyes cold. "Long time no see, brother," he said, pushing off the truck. "We need to talk about Dad's house." At first, I thought it was a bad joke, but Ryan wasn't smiling. He said he'd been talking to a lawyer, that he'd found paperwork proving the property should be split 50-50. My stomach dropped. The house, Dad's house, was supposed to stay whole. I'd lived here, cared for Dad through his last illness, handled every unpaid bill. Ryan had vanished before the hospice bed even arrived. I told him he must have been mistaken. He shrugged, almost casual. "Mistaken? Dad wanted it fair. You got the job, the family, the good life. This is just balance." His words landed like gravel in my throat. Balance? He'd never seen what I carried to keep this place alive. Before I could answer, Lily stepped out of the car, backpack slung over one shoulder. Ryan's grin widened. "Is that my niece? Wow, she's grown. You gonna introduce us?" My hands tightened around the keys. "Get back in the car, Lily." She obeyed, sensing the tension. Ryan's smirk faded. He jammed his hands into his pockets. "You're serious about keeping it all, huh?" I said quietly. "Dad left this to me. You know that." He took a step closer. "Then I guess we'll let the courts decide." For a moment, all I heard was the rustle of leaves and the hum of the idling truck. The brother I'd once shared a room with, who'd stolen my Halloween candy, borrowed my bike, and laughed beside me at Dad's workshop, was now a stranger with a lawyer. Inside my chest, something cracked. Not loud, just final. If you've ever had a family member show up only when there's money on the table, share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you believe some bonds are worth protecting no matter the cost, subscribe, because what came next nearly destroyed everything I'd built. Ryan climbed into his truck, rolled down the window, and said one last thing before driving off. "You'll hear from my attorney." The taillights disappeared down the street, but the echo stayed. I stowed in the driveway until the air turned cold, the roses by the porch swaying in the wind like they knew something was ending. That night, I tucked Lily into bed, but my mind was spinning. Could he really take this from us? The house wasn't just lumber and nails. It was Dad's legacy, the proof of every calloused hand and sleepless night. I sat alone in the kitchen staring at the grain of the old wooden table Dad had carved decades ago. For the first time since his funeral, I whispered his name aloud. "Dad, I don't know what to do." Outside, thunder rumbled over Austin. Inside, the storm had already begun. When people look at me now, they see the man I became, not the boy who grew up counting coins to keep the lights on. But to understand why this house matters, you need to know where it came from and who built it. Dad, Robert Miller, wasn't just a carpenter. He was the kind of man who believed a house wasn't just wood and nails. It was a living promise. He built this place in Temple, Texas, right after Mom left. No blueprint, no contractors, just his calloused hands, a worn tape measure, and a stubborn will. Every beam, every window frame, carried the rhythm of his heartbeat. I still remember the mornings he'd wake before sunrise, his boots already dusted with sawdust before I even brushed my teeth. He'd hand me a hammer half my size and say, "Son, a house stands tall when the people inside it do too." Back then, Ryan was 13, wild, charming, and restless. He'd vanish for hours, chasing noise and friends who lived for trouble. Dad used to worry, but always covered for him. "He'll find his way," he'd say, while I swept the sawdust off the porch. Mom's absence hung in the air like humidity, heavy, invisible, inescapable. Some nights, Dad would sit on the porch steps, staring at the horizon. I'd hear the clink of his coffee mug and the quiet sigh that followed. He never spoke badly of her, but I saw the cracks forming behind his silence. When I turned 16, Ryan was already gone, hitchhiking toward Dallas with dreams bigger than his patience. "You'll see," he'd said, tossing his duffel bag over his shoulder. "I'm not dying in this small town." Dad just watched him go. No anger in his eyes, only heartbreak. After that, it was just the two of us, Dad and me. We made do with what we had: late rent, secondhand clothes, meals that stretched too thin. I worked part-time at the hardware store after school, while Dad kept his small repair business afloat. Some days we didn't have enough for gas, so we'd ride his old bike together into town, me balancing a box of tools on my lap. When Dad got sick, I was 23. It started with shortness of breath, then hospital visits, then oxygen tanks humming softly by his chair. I wanted to believe it was temporary. He wanted me to keep working. "Don't let this place die just because I'm slowing down," he'd say. So I did everything I could, balancing shifts, cooking dinner, fixing leaky pipes at night. I remember one winter, the heater broke, and I slept beside him in the living room, wrapped in blankets, feeding the fire every hour. His hands trembled too much to split wood anymore, so I took over. He'd smile faintly, whispering, "You've got steady hands, son." Those words, they stayed with me. When the end came, it wasn't dramatic. He passed quietly one morning, sunlight spilling through the curtains. On the bedside table was his old notebook, the one he used for measurements and sketches. On the last page, he'd written just one line in faded pencil. "For Evan, the house stands because you did too." That line broke me and rebuilt me all at once. Ryan didn't come to the funeral, not even a call. The man who claimed Dad wanted it fair hadn't shown up to say goodbye. I buried Dad myself, with help from 2 neighbors and an old friend from the hardware store. We built his coffin from oak planks he'd saved for something special. I guess he knew. After that, the house became my lifeline. I repaired the roof, repainted the porch, kept every tool exactly where Dad left it. Years passed. I got married, had Lily, and told her stories about the grandfather she never met, the man who could turn broken wood into beauty. Even after my marriage ended, this house never let me fall apart. It held me like a memory that refused to fade. So when Ryan appeared after a decade of silence, talking about shares and rights, it felt like he wasn't just attacking me, he was desecrating Dad's grave. This wasn't about money. It was about the years I gave up to protect something sacred. Sometimes I still see Dad in the flicker of the porch light and hear his voice when the wind moves through the trees. And every time I remember the weight of his final words. "A house stands tall when the people inside it do too." I thought I was standing tall until Ryan came back to tear it all down. For a week, I tried to convince myself Ryan would come to his senses. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, some paperwork mix-up, or a desperate plea for help. But then the first letter arrived. Thick envelope, legal watermark, my name printed in bold, Evan Miller, respondent. Inside was a claim filed through the county court, demanding the house be liquidated and the proceeds split in accordance with the rightful heirs. Rightful heirs. Those two words sent a heat through my chest that felt like fire. I called the number on the letter, his lawyer, a woman named Karen Douglas. She was polite, rehearsed. "Mr. Miller, your brother simply wants what's fair. He says you manipulated your father while he was ill." Manipulated. The same father I spoon-fed soup to when he couldn't lift his own hands? The same man I carried down the hall when he couldn't breathe? My voice cracked. "Tell him this isn't about fairness. It's about greed." She sighed like she'd heard it 1,000 times before. "You can respond in writing, sir." Click. Line dead. By that weekend, Ryan's posts started showing up online. He'd always been good at spinning a story. On Facebook, he wrote about a hard-working man robbed of his inheritance by a selfish brother. He attached an old picture of the two of us when we were kids, the one where we were building a treehouse in the backyard. The caption read, "Funny how people change once money's involved." Within days, distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years started texting me, asking what was going on. Some offered sympathy. Others said, "Maybe you should just give him his share and move on." I couldn't believe how fast a lie could spread when it was wrapped in nostalgia. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Lily's school. A man claiming to be her uncle tried to pick her up. We stopped him. My heart stopped. I drove there in minutes, pulse pounding, fury boiling under my skin. Ryan was standing by the fence, hands in his pockets, smirking like it was all a joke. "Relax, man, I just wanted to say hi to my niece." I stepped between him and the gate. "You stay away from her." He shrugged. "You make it sound like I'm the bad guy." "You are." For a second his face twisted, the charm peeling away, the resentment underneath showing through. "Dad always liked you better," he said quietly. "Even when you failed, I saw the way he looked at you, like some damn saint." That sentence hit harder than I expected. It wasn't about the house anymore. It never had been. This was about jealousy. Festering for years, hidden behind that lazy grin. "You think this is about favoritism?" He stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "No, this is about what I deserve." I wanted to hit him. God, I did. But I saw Lily watching from the car window, eyes wide, scared. So I didn't. I just turned and walked away, my fists clenched, my teeth grinding. That night, anger churned in me like a storm I couldn't contain. I found myself casing the living room, staring at Dad's tools on the wall, his old hammer, his measuring tape, things that once built a home now felt like reminders of everything I could lose. I picked up the phone and called Ryan. He answered on the second ring. "What do you want now?" I asked. He laughed. "Relax. I'm just saying this doesn't have to get ugly. You sell the place, I'll take my half, and we both move on." My voice shook. "You didn't earn a damn inch of this place." "Oh, right. You're the hero, the martyr." His tone turned venomous. "Maybe Dad left it to you because he pitied you. You were always his little charity case." Something inside me snapped. "Say what you want about me, but don't you dare drag him into this. You weren't there." He paused, then said the cruelest thing I'd ever heard. "Maybe it's better I wasn't. Watching him rot in that bed must have been pathetic." I hung up before my hands could betray me. For a moment, the house felt smaller, darker. The air itself seemed to tighten around me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an accusation. Every shadow reminded me of Dad's face, the tired smile, the quiet strength. And I knew Ryan's war wasn't just against me. It was against everything our father stood for. He wanted to stain it, to make it dirty. And I couldn't let him. As dawn broke over Austin, I looked out the window at the porch Dad built. The sun hit the wood just right, and for a brief second, I could almost hear his voice again. A house stands tall when the people inside it do too. My jaw tightened, my heart slowed. I realized then, if Ryan wanted a fight, I'd give him one, but not the kind he expected. A few weeks later, the storm finally broke, not with thunder, but with paper. A notice from the Travis County Court landed in my mailbox, stamped and official. A hearing date had been set. Ryan hadn't just bluffed. He'd filed a full claim to contest Dad's will, accusing me of undue influence and financial manipulation of a vulnerable parent. Reading those words felt like swallowing glass. My throat went dry. I could see the signatures, the seals, the language that turned memories into evidence and love into liability. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one Dad built from oak slabs, surrounded by papers, bills, and printouts. My coffee went cold hours ago. Lily was asleep upstairs, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a father or a son. I felt like a man sinking. The next morning, I went into work, but my head wasn't there. I design custom mechanical parts. Precision is everything, but my hands trembled every time I touched a tool. By noon, my supervisor called me into his office. "Evan, you need to clear your head," he said gently. "Until this thing settles, we're putting you on temporary leave." Temporary leave, a polite way of saying, we can't have your mess dragging us down. When I walked out of the building, the Texas sun was blinding. For a moment, I just stood there in the heat, trying not to break down in front of strangers. That afternoon, I found a small box on my porch. No return address. Inside were old photographs. Dad and me fixing the roof, Ryan grinning with a fishing rod, Mom during one of her rare visits. On top was a sticky note. "You don't deserve this house." My stomach twisted. I knew whose handwriting that was. I called Ryan, my voice shaking. "You're crossing the line." He laughed. "Prove it." Then hung up. That night, sleep refused to come. Every noise outside made my heart race. I checked the locks twice, then 3 times. At 2 a.m., headlights flashed across the living room wall, a car idling outside. I peeked through the curtain and saw Ryan's truck. He didn't knock. He just sat there for a while, engine running, then drove away. By morning, I was running on fumes. I brewed another pot of coffee and opened my laptop, only to find my email flooded with password reset alerts. Bank account, work profile, even my cloud drive. Someone had tried logging in. I froze. The same panic I'd felt when Dad was gasping for air hit me all over again, helpless, suffocating. I checked the login history, one attempt traced back to a device in Dallas, Ryan City. That was the breaking point, not because of the hacking, not even the lawsuit, but because of what it meant. He didn't just want to take the house. He wanted to tear down my life piece by piece. That night, Lily found me sitting in the hallway, staring at a photo of Dad. She wrapped her little arms around me and whispered, "It's okay, Daddy. Grandpa would fix it." I held her close, unable to speak, because deep down, I wasn't sure I could fix anything anymore. After she went back to bed, I walked into the garage, the old workshop where Dad once carved furniture. The air smelled like dust and oil. His tools hung neatly on the wall, untouched since the day he died. I ran my hand over his hammer, remembering his voice, "Steady hands, Evan." Mine weren't steady anymore. They shook from anger, exhaustion, grief. A cocktail I couldn't swallow down. That night, I finally broke. I sank to the floor, tears spilling faster than I could stop them. For the first time since losing Dad, I whispered out loud, "I can't do this, Dad. Not this time." The house was silent. Only the wind answered back,
rattling the windows like it pitied me.
The next morning, I woke up on the garage floor, my back aching, my eyes swollen from crying. The air smelled faintly of cedar, Dad's scent still clinging to the wood. I don't know what changed inside me, but something did. Maybe it was Lily's voice echoing from the night before. Maybe it was the memory of Dad telling me to keep the house standing. Either way, I knew I couldn't stay broken. When I looked around, the first thing I saw was Dad's old workbench. The grain was scarred from decades of projects, but it was solid, steady. That word rang in my head like a command. Steady. So I stood up, showered, shaved, and made a list. Not of emotions this time, but of actions. Secure every account. Change passwords. Call the bank. Find a lawyer who believes me. By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from Thomas Keene, a retired attorney in his 60s who'd once helped Dad with property documents. His office smelled like paper and dust, a comforting kind of order. I told him everything. The lawsuit, the hacking, the harassment. Thomas listened without interrupting, his sharp gray eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Evan, your father trusted me with his final will. I still have a copy in my archives." My breath caught. "You do?" He nodded and unlocked a metal cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. Inside was the original, notarized will dated 2 months before Dad's death, with signatures from 2 witnesses and a clear line naming me as the sole heir. No joint ownership, no equal split, just one sentence that changed everything. "The house and its contents shall pass in full to my eldest son, Evan Miller, who has cared for me until my final days." I felt the tension in my chest ease, like the first crack of light after a long storm. Thomas smiled faintly. "Your brother's version is a fake. The handwriting doesn't match, and the notary stamp on his copy expired before the document date. It's sloppy forgery." Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. "So we can fight this?" He said, "We can win this, but you need to stay calm. Let him underestimate you." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking in panic. I still heard the wind, but it no longer sounded like warning, more like breathing space. The next few days were methodical. I gathered evidence, photos of Dad's illness, the hospice receipts in my name, text messages showing Ryan's absence. I even found a voicemail from Dad, recorded a year before his passing, saying, "Son, when I'm gone, take care of the place. It's yours to protect." Each file I organized, each statement I printed made me feel stronger, not vengeful, but anchored. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was defending the truth. Lily noticed the difference. "You're not sad today," she said one evening, climbing into my lap. I smiled. "No, sweetheart, I'm not sad. I'm just getting ready." "For what?" "To make things right." Later that night, I stood outside on the porch, the sky washed in silver moonlight. The wind rustled through the trees, and the house creaked softly, like it was alive, listening. I thought about Dad, how he never raised his voice even when life was cruel. His strength had always been quiet, patient, the kind that waited for the right moment to strike. And for the first time since this all began, I felt that same calm rise in me. The next step wasn't about anger, it was about dignity. Ryan had turned our father's legacy into a game, but now I finally had the rulebook, and I was done playing by his.
The court hearing was set for a Thursday morning in late October. The air outside the Travis County Courthouse carried that crisp edge of fall, cool enough to wake you up, sharp enough to remind you what mattered. I arrived early with Thomas Keene, the old lawyer who had become both my ally and my anchor. Ryan showed up 10 minutes before the hearing, wearing a suit too shiny for the occasion and confidence that didn't belong to him. He smirked as he walked past me. "You ready to lose, big brother?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't reacting, I was prepared. Inside the courtroom, everything felt slowed down. The hum of fluorescent lights, the shuffle of papers, the judge adjusting her glasses. Ryan's attorney, Karen Douglas, stood and launched into her speech about a son wronged and a manipulative caretaker. She painted me as a greedy man who'd taken advantage of a dying father. Every word was a stab, but I stayed still, hands folded, listening. When it was our turn, Thomas rose calmly. His voice didn't shake. It carried the quiet confidence of truth. Your Honor, we have the original notarized will, signed and witnessed in this very county, confirming Mr. Evan Miller as the sole heir. Additionally, we have handwriting analysis proving the opposing document is falsified. He placed both copies on the judge's desk. Side by side, the difference was obvious, one neat and dated, the other sloppy, rushed. The notary's seal expired 2 years earlier. Ryan shifted in his seat. The smirk began to fade. Thomas continued, methodical and merciless. He presented photos, receipts, and witness statements showing I'd cared for our father during his final illness. Every hospital bill, every prescription, every week of hospice signed in my name. When he finished, the judge turned to Ryan. Your Honor, do you have an explanation for the inconsistencies in this document? Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. His lawyer whispered something, but the damage had already been done. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, the judge sighed. This court finds the claim by Ryan Miller to be without merit. The will naming Evan Miller as sole beneficiary is upheld in full. Her gavel struck once, sharp, final. Ryan stood up abruptly. This is rigged, he shouted, his voice cracking. He's lying! They're both lying! The bailiff stepped forward, warning him to calm down. His lawyer gathered her papers, face pale with embarrassment. Ryan tried to speak again, but it came out as a choked mix of rage and panic. I didn't move. I just watched him unravel. The man who'd turned my grief into a weapon, now drowning in his own deceit. When the hearing ended, Thomas put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, son. You kept it standing. Outside, the sunlight felt different, warmer, cleaner. The courthouse steps gleamed like they were washed in gold. I breathed deep, the kind of breath that feels like you've been underwater too long. As I reached my truck, Ryan came out behind me, his eyes bloodshot. You think this makes you better than me? He spat. Dad's gone. None of this matters. I turned to him, voice calm but firm. It matters because he trusted me to protect what he built. And I did. He stared at me for a long moment, then looked away, muttering something I couldn't hear, before walking off down the sidewalk. That was the last time I ever saw him. Later that evening, I stopped by the diner Dad used to love. I ordered his favorite, black coffee and a slice of pecan pie, and sat by the window. Outside, the city lights flickered on, steady and sure. I realized justice didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace, quiet, honest, earned. And maybe that was enough.
A year has passed since that day in court, and life has finally gone quiet again. Not the empty kind of quiet, but the peaceful kind you notice after a long storm. The house still creaks in the same places it always did. The porch still smells like sawdust after rain. But it feels lighter now, almost like the air itself has forgiven me for all the shouting and anger that once filled these walls. Most evenings, I sit on that porch with Lily, watching her chase fireflies through the yard. She laughs the way I used to when Dad would toss me into the air, free, fearless, sure that someone was waiting to catch her. Sometimes I wonder if Dad's spirit lingers here, watching her the way he once watched me. I like to think he does. After the court case, I could have sold the house, moved somewhere new, started over, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I fixed it up. New siding, fresh paint, even rebuilt the front steps that had started to rot. Every nail I drove into that wood felt like a heartbeat. proof that we were still standing. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a short note written in Ryan's handwriting. "You won. I lost everything. Hope you're happy." There was no bitterness in it, just exhaustion. I read it 3 times, then folded it back and tucked it inside Dad's old toolbox. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger toward my brother, only a kind of sadness I couldn't name. Because the truth is, I didn't want to beat him. I just wanted him to stop breaking things. In the months that followed, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Hannah Brooks, who helped me understand that surviving betrayal isn't just about fighting back. It's about reclaiming peace. She asked me one question that stuck. "What do you want this house to mean now, Evan?" I didn't have an answer then, but I do now. I wanted it to mean continuity. Not the kind that traps you in the past, the kind that lets the past flow forward into something good. So I took a leap. I turned Dad's old workshop into a small community woodcraft program for kids from low-income families, the kind of kids who need somewhere safe to go after school. I called it the Steady Hands Project, after Dad's words. The first day, only 3 kids showed up, shy, quiet, their hands unsure with the tools. I showed them how to sand, how to measure, how to build something that wouldn't fall apart. By the end of the day, they each took home a tiny wooden box they made themselves. Their smiles, I can't describe it. It felt like watching broken pieces turn into something whole. Now, every Saturday, that workshop fills with laughter, sawdust, and sunlight streaming through the open door. Lily helps too, handing out brushes and glue, bossing everyone around like a tiny forewoman. Sometimes, when the light hits just right, I can almost see Dad there, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, smiling that quiet smile of his. And in those moments, I realize something simple and beautiful. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your effort, your struggle, your healing. Blood may connect you by birth, but choice connects you by love. I still think about Ryan sometimes. Not with hate, just hope. Hope that wherever he is, he finds a way to stop fighting ghosts and start building something of his own. Because in the end, that's what Dad would have wanted, for both of us to keep building. I know my story isn't unique. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you once called family, you know the ache, that sharp, private pain that keeps you up at night. But you also know this: it doesn't have to define you. You can rebuild. You can forgive without reopening the door. You can choose peace over revenge, dignity over destruction. And if my story spoke to something in you, if it made you remember or feel, or maybe even heal a little, tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. Because no matter how deep the break, there's always a way to build again, one steady hand at a time.